Today on the Robot Thought Leaders podcast, we're talking to Jake Hall, who is the Manufacturing Millennial on LinkedIn.
Jake joins us to talk about China, the competition, and where the future of manufacturing as well as automation is headed.
It was a pretty awesome conversation. We covered a lot of different topics. 10% of the workforce in America right now is working in manufacturing, and by itself, that would be the seventh largest GDP in the world.
Yeah, and percentage-wise, that's about 12% of the U.S. GDP. So just add some perspective to it. Jake talks a little bit about his future of his brand and how he got started and being the youngest person in the room at an AHTD meeting, in which inspired him about 18 months ago to start the Manufacturing Millennial.
Yeah, we talked about IoT, where it's going in the future. His experience in robotics is pretty varied, and he has a lot of different color to add to some of the topics that we'll be talking about today. So please join us and tune in.
Yeah, exactly. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders Podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.
All right, we're on. So, well, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Jake.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to be on, guys.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast, Robot Thought Leaders. We're happy to have you on this week. You know, I think it was just recently you went viral with like 2,000 likes and comments on LinkedIn for that Lego post. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. That was a fun post to bring a little bit of everyone's kids' memories to real life manufacturing.
Yeah, and actually my memories too, I have to admit. I think I still probably play with Legos more than I would like to admit, actually. But yeah, so when you started with the Manufacturing Millennial, like how did you even think about this? Like, you know, I'm sure you have a background, a career in manufacturing that led you to that point, but what made you want to go viral and start your own brand?
Yeah, I mean, so the manufacturing personal brand kind of developed when I was in industrial distribution. So I was working for distributors selling AMRs, AGVs, collaborative robots, vision, safety. And I was attending a national event in a room with a bunch of business owners and leaders. And as I looked across that room, I saw that as a millennial, you know, my age group was completely underrepresented in that room. You know, there was maybe one or two other guys under the age of 40 sitting in that entire room. And I said, there's a huge disparity gap between millennials just within this leadership organization, but also just in manufacturing in general. I said, so I need to find a way to, you know, encourage the next generation of workforce to be a part of manufacturing. I said, well, I'm a millennial. I love manufacturing. And that's kind of how the brand of the Manufacturing Millennial came about.
That's awesome.
What event was it that you were at that kind of sparked it for you?
Yeah, it was AHTD, the Association of High Technology Distributors. So
yeah,
a lot of the distributors across the U.S. And it's a phenomenal organization to be a part of our part of that event. And yeah, I was sitting there. I think it was in California when I heard that a speaker talking. I said, well, let's do it.
That's funny. We had Sam Bouchard on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the HTD event as like very, you know, that was a lever point for him, you know, and really Robotique in general in terms of taking off. So
what's crazy is it was in Quebec City that year. So if you think about it, you know, obviously them being from Quebec City, they had all of their potential partners, not all of them, but a ton of their potential partner sales managers, owners, all coming to his city. And so, you know, he was talking about how like when you have a company, you know, timing is everything. You know, you can do everything right, and then just the timing can just happen. And it was just this perfect thing. So kind of a different situation, but kind of similar in the sense that you know, kind of realize in that moment, just, wow, like this age group is underrepresented. People under 40 are completely, you know, not very well represented within all of manufacturing, and including in automation too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because, you know, millennials in terms of generations is actually the largest since 2017. Millennials became the largest working generation here in the U.S. as a whole. But when you look at manufacturing, the manufacturing in terms of like mean average in age is not matching the US Bureau of Labor. We're like 7-8 years higher in terms of the average age of manufacturing than across other industries. And that just shows that, you know, the younger generations are not entering the manufacturing workforce like they once did.
Yeah.
And I saw you gave that statistic the other day, and when I listened, and you were saying that it was basically compared to 20 years ago, right? So it's the change that has occurred as in manufacturing, as a lot of other industries have gotten younger. Manufacturing has gotten 8 years older from the, you know, basically 2021 versus 2001 or something like that.
Yeah. So if you were to take the mean age of all people in manufacturing back in 2000 and compare it to the mean age of, I think the number was from 2019, but the mean age of the average worker in manufacturing in 2019, so almost 20 years later, that age has increased 7 years. So it just shows
the US,
that,
right?
Yeah, in the US. So it just shows just massive age gap that's happening in manufacturing right now. And the younger generations are not entering the workforce.
Yeah. I did a presentation at Modex actually, and it was a year ago, almost to the day, right? It was the last trade show I was at, Atlanta, Georgia, and I was filling in for one of our colleagues, Joe Campbell. And it's interesting because, you know, he's a boomer and Joe's an admitted boomer. You know, he kind of embraces it.
Yeah.
And he was doing a presentation on the labor crisis. And, you know, I would say 7 of kind of like, you know, every keynote has those key slides, right? They're kind of like the real money. And there was like 7 slides or so that were talking about statistics of how, and he kind of got up and his spiel was like, I'm a boomer and I was always encouraging my kids to never take manufacturing jobs. Like, you know, that's way beneath them. And I always encourage them to go get education and, you know, to get after those white collar jobs. And he wasn't able to attend Modex because of COVID. And it was like right when it was starting. And so he had me go up. And of course, I'm a millennial. And it was just a pretty funny dichotomy that I was like speaking to that audience. And I was like, well, you know, Joe would have been talking to you today. He's, you know, he's a bit older than me, but we're going to say the same message. And I can tell you from personal experience that my parents told me not to go after those manufacturing jobs, to go get an education and try and get a white collar job or some engineering job or something like that. To get you out of, you know, the work in those dirty, dull, and dangerous, as they say. So
Yeah,
it was a pretty funny moment I found myself.
But it's interesting as you look out, because, I mean, I've been on probably 500 factory floors, you know, in the last 7 years. And just the sheer amount of like the people that are there, you really see how the age is impacting the workforce. So when you start to see a lot of the movements that are done, whether that's like picking up a package or, you know, bending over in a way and picking things up, and it's or using your hands in a certain way. I mean, a lot of these skills are even more difficult for individuals that are older to take on too. So as that age also creeps in, you know, there's a lot of skills that just can't be done that I think have also paved a way for robotics and for automation as we look forward, because of just the like what happens as you age and the skills that you can't do anymore.
Yeah,
so it's almost exacerbated. Like, yes, the age is older, but like the capability is probably even less than it would be if they were 20 years younger.
Exactly. And when you bring up to the conversations about, you know, what's driving automation and what trends are happening in manufacturing, a lot of it has to do with the workforce. And it's really a symbiotic relationship between new technology and younger workforces, where if you have a manufacturer, this manufacturer hasn't implemented new manufacturing processes or automation or industry 4.0 solutions or new technology in 20 years, that's not going to attract a younger worker. So when you don't have a younger worker, you don't have someone out there who's wanting to drive change throughout a manufacturing process, who's wanting to implement new solutions. And so you're at this stalemate. So when it comes to how do manufacturers who have a aging workforce, who are competing against, a global market now within manufacturing processes. How do companies compete? Well, they need to hire younger, labor, or a younger workforce of millennials and Gen Zs, which I think is the generation following millennials,
Mm-hmm.
that is not scared about technology, is not scared about driving innovation and new ideas to the manufacturing floor. And it's going to drive, on the discussion of robotics and collaborative robots, a younger generation who grew up with touch screens and iPads and tablets. The layout of a collaborative robot system is completely different than what people grew up with 20 years ago with an old LCD screen with the old teach pendants on robotics.
Yeah.
It's a completely different world. And I think that's one of the big reasons why, when you look at trends happening in manufacturing, and that's mobile industrial robots, collaborative robots, IIoT, is because the familiarization with younger generations, it's not something that we're scared of or we're scared to approach.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think I've seen a lot of times where even robots in general, not just collaborative robots, but really robots in general, are used because they're sexy. And frankly, people, especially younger people, love to be around high tech stuff. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you can show that off, I mean, again, calling back to Joe, he loves to sell potential case studies with customers as a way to do recruitment. Right. Just as you were saying, these companies, a lot of times, some of the best case studies we have on our website will actually, they'll take that footage, they'll cut that again, and they'll use it in like an HR promo to like recruit good talent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's true. Absolutely.
It's the same thing as like when you see a company putting a robot on their main page when they have nothing to do with it. It's just a manufacturing facility producing lots of parts, but they want to appear as being high tech to attract young talent. I think that the more tools that anybody has, I think, like, even for myself in a company, I want the best tools possible to work with. So I can only imagine that if I was in the manufacturing facility and wanting to be in that space as my career, I would want the best tools. I think what's going to be interesting to see is, like, we've often talked, Chris, about like gamification of
Mm-hmm.
the manufacturing floor. Ultimately, how can you attract more people to this space or increase the skill set of the people that are there? Is gamification a possibility and maybe it's gamification through competition? Maybe you're a fulfillment facility and you are trying to get parts per hour per individual, and you create a sort of competition where on a daily basis it's individual X versus individual Y, and you're on a team and you're trying to get as many parts in. Do you see like that? Is there an area in manual skill sets that are outside of automation that you see, Jake, when it comes to like gamification within the manufacturing facility?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put on it when you're looking at, driving competition and employees from a manufacturing level. I think what we are seeing more is what I have seen being put in place. I'll just use this as an example, is automation being used as a pacemaker throughout a manufacturing process. So when I see examples of, when I go to a manufacturing and say, hey, I see you implemented this, robotic or this robot or collaborative robot or automation system. I say, what are some of the reasons you went through that? And they say, well, this is a driver in terms of keeping the rest of the manufacturing line on speed. So they know if I could have a consistent base of a robot that's handling palletizing or doing some material handling and placing it, that's driving the rest of the assembly line to keep up through its manufacturing processes that necessarily can't be automated. So in a sense of, yeah, there's some gamification happening between employees within the manufacturing floor, but I think what we're seeing more often is automation is driving a cycle time and a production rate that is helping pace workers on the line.
There's actually a study, I think, by MIT. I've referenced it a couple times in some slide decks that I forget the exact percentage, so don't quote me on it, but I think it was like 60% more effective when you have human robot collaboration on a line, setting the pace for line workers than either robotic integration or human like assembly by itself. I'll find that exact study, and perhaps we can like put it in the comments or something, or the infographic underneath the podcast after this.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like, because with a lot of manufacturing processes, there's not ROI justification a lot of times to manufacture or to automate a complete process.
Yeah.
But when you do a robot and operator, integration together, you can draw the high labor or um, large repetitive tasks or areas that increase risk to the operator, doing the same thing over and over again, or and a process that might not be as safe when they're moving product around the entire time. When you implement a robotic solution into a manual assembly line, it really benefits everyone, because we're reducing the stress and labor, but then we're also creating a timeline for the manufacturer to hit rate.
Yeah, I'm sure you've probably used ROI calculators, in your automation distribution days, and have we all seen them? And they're always so simple.
Mhm.
They're always like 6 fields, plug in number of shifts, cost per hour, and like number of workers, and it spits out some return on investment. And it's always more subtle than that. There's so many factors, like you said.
Yep.
Maybe you don't fully automate, maybe you don't fully replace that person. Now you can time splice them into other activities, or maybe you have an overall increase in quality. How do you quantify scrap rates? How do you quantify like reduced return parts from quality improvements? It's not an easy calculation a lot of times. So the best people typically have or the best customers, I would say, typically have a vision for what they want to achieve, and
Yeah.
they kind of have to take a leap at some point. That's
Absolutely.
the right choice.
I think ROI justification as a result of, COVID and the pandemic, during, the pandemic, and leaving out of it. Um, we're approaching automation in a different way, at least with a lot of manufacturers that I'm looking at, within food and pharmaceutical and some consumer base, which is kind of the industry I really touch. It's interesting to see where it's not about, well, hey, how can we become more profitable? How can we reduce labor? It's the fact that a lot of these places right now, they can't find enough labor. I haven't walked into one manufacturing facility in the past 6 months, and I have not seen a hiring sign.
Yep.
Or a job form fill out. And it's every industry. It's people looking for controls engineers, people looking for manufacturing engineers, people looking for operators in first, second, and third shift. It's one of those things when it comes to justification of automation. It's not just about trying to reduce the bottom line. It's trying to have enough resources to be productive and meet your current demand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've said it a few times on the podcast, but there's been a huge change since COVID. I mean, even before COVID, it was a little bit of a lull in the market. I think that, we weren't seeing as much interest in robots, and then COVID hit, and it definitely pulled back to a few years before numbers. And then you all of a sudden get this massive surge where I don't know what exactly caused it, but it was like the mindset of, it was once people realized that that COVID wasn't going to destroy their business, that they needed to prepare for the 5 years down the road. And now all of a sudden robots were the most attractive thing that they could add to their business, or automation in general was something that the most important thing that they could add to their business. Have you seen similar factors as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see a lot of trends happening in manufacturing, I think, as a result of the pandemic. One of them immediately comes to mind is employee safety. When we talked about where it's not just the safety of the employees, but it's also, employees need to be kept at a safe distance now. When you're in a lot of manufacturing facilities, you could have 20 people, 15, 20 people in a line, that's 30 feet long. Well, you can't do that anymore,
Yeah.
with the whole 6 foot separation, all that stuff. So how do you keep up with that production rate without having operators standing next to each other? And a lot of times you're implementing automation or a robot in between each person. There's a lot with that way. I look at some other things as well, where IoT is a big thing right now, where we're looking at not necessarily implementing new equipment onto the floor, but how can I take a lot of that information and make it smarter? How can I actually collect a manufacturing machine that's always been running, but actually begin to get data out of it, understand, hey, what is my rate? What's my scrap rate? What's my OEE?
Yeah.
All this other information. And companies as well in terms of like modeling. And this is a little bit of a shift, but when you look at a lot of manufacturers right now and a lot of companies in manufacturing who are producing products, they're shifting from a B2B to B2C market, because no longer are companies moving to a business to business relationship, but you see a lot of these manufacturers directly targeting their customers and their consumers.
Hmm.
So it's
You're
really
saying, like,
exciting.
Yeah, it's true.
Instead of
It's true.
routing
Cut out the
that
middleman.
business through-
That's what happens. Go ahead, Zach. Sorry.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say. So you're saying instead of routing that business back through some sort of value-added area, that they're finding that they can increase their, like, I don't know if it's like transparency but I don't even know if it's marketing, but essentially their reach to the end customer directly.
Yeah, 100%. We're seeing that manufacturers and companies are, like, for example, you mentioned case studies, and really it goes back to my phrase, stop selling and start solving. Well, manufacturers are out there trying to solve what these companies need and manufacturers in terms of what their problems are facing on the manufacturing floor. And when they're going out there and they're targeting what those problems are, no longer is a company like you are just trying to sell them a collaborative robot. They're out there trying to solve a problem on the floor. And
Love
I
that
think
phrase. I'm going to steal that for sure. I'll quote you. I'll cite you.
You quote it,
when I
man, but
use
that's my catchphrase.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's I've definitely seen that before all over your stuff. That's awesome. Yeah.
But and I think the last thing that when you look at trending, kind of happening in the manufacturing industry, since we're talking about it, is manufacturers are reevaluating how they're shoring and sourcing components. And I think that's the biggest thing that happened during the pandemic, is when I was having discussions with a lot of, global manufacturers, is their production lines stopped because they couldn't get certain components from China.
Yep.
and other areas. So they say, wow, look how
Vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. Look how vulnerable our manufacturing process is, where they never would have thought that getting some specific components from a source across seas was so important. So I see a lot of things happening where manufacturers are really going to start developing more personal relationships with their suppliers.
Yeah.
And they're going to be asking their suppliers to give more information when it comes to their manufacturing process. So it goes back to that whole IoT thing, where if a large tier 1, tier 2 company is sourcing a product, they want to know, what is your production rate? How many parts did you produce in the last week? So we are aware of what your capacity is. If you have 6 of these machines that are making these parts, but you're running at 50% OEE right now, and they need a demand, they say, okay, how can we go back to this customer and invest into modernization of their equipment to drive up their OEE, rather than going out and finding a brand new supplier?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of information that's really interesting when it comes to manufacturers and completely reevaluating the procurement side of the assembly of their components.
Yeah, it's supply chain traceability.
Yeah.
Is really becoming more evident, and not necessarily even diversifying completely away from China, because I think people will always have that in their pocket for cost reduction and essentially to set the baseline for what the acceptable threshold for cost has become with the American consumer market. But I do think that they're diversifying their options, and they're always going to have an American backup, now at least, or even if they're not the first one, they're going to have an option to choose a made in America parts supply chain,
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Well, it's
But,
interesting, right? I mean, when you talk about like China, I think that there's a reason also how China is being able to pursue that. I think long-term China has obviously invested significantly into automation. I mean, Jake, you've put some stats out there on how many robots that China is putting out on a yearly basis. You do have anything to quote here?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, right, I think in 2018, China integrated more robots than the rest of the world combined. And I think, kind of going back to what you said, Chris, is a lot of I think manufacturers are realizing that, listen, China is no longer this super low cost labor out there. China is turning to automation as a solution because that's where they're driving a competitive edge. So when you look at a lot of companies now saying, well, shoot, if China's automating this process, why can't we automate that same exact process here back in the United States, or a European company here back in Europe? So it goes back to a lot of reshoring. I know several companies who've been developing electronics for boards within the manufacturing industry, and they're taking that product that was developed and being built out in China, and they're resourcing it back here in the US, just because they say, listen, we have a lot more control over it. We're reducing our risk when it comes to the procurement of this product. That is going to completely stabilize our manufacturing line to improve our quality.
Yeah. And that was a very, purposeful, I think it was called the China 2020, initiative that they were talking about. And I remember this was quite a hot topic in late 18 into 19. And it was about the initiative that China was taking for two things, mostly robotics and electric vehicles, and how they were going to really bring in and repatriate like all of those different technologies, right, for robotics. So I think that's why we've seen a huge surge in the last like 4 years of made in China robots as well, and also made in China EVs. Like, how many different Tesla ripoffs do they have over there now as well? So that's very much a top-down thing. That was a strategic decision by their government to push this automation as well. I think they saw that it was coming.
How far do you think we're behind, Jake? From your research, I know you've stayed very well in tune with the market and kind of US versus China, but how far, and it's the rest of the world too. I mean, it's not just the US, but when you compare like our automation capabilities here in the US, I'm not saying in sheer numbers or percentage, because I know we're really, really far behind from a percentage of robots used to say for a number of tasks. But when you look at the overall number of I mean like years of maybe skill sets behind applications that they're pursuing that we're not able to do now.
It's
decades.
Yeah, it's really hard to say when it comes to that. I would still say a lot of unique manufacturing processes and stuff, ingenuity is still being driven here in Europe and in the United States. But when it comes to a sheer adoption of how important manufacturing is to an economy, I would say China really recognizes it. They when it comes to, and it's a different government style over in China, but they recognize that how they'll move forward as the country with the largest GDP in the world. Now, currently the US is here, but they're saying in 10 years China's going to be,
no matter what we do,
China's going to be the largest economy in the world. I think it goes back to how many components right now are we outsourcing to China, or are other countries outsourcing to China, versus what we can begin to reshore here to not just, it's a global economy now. It's not, country X versus country Y, but I think it comes down to how do companies and manufacturers stay competitive. And I think a lot of that has to do with reshoring and resourcing locally.
But wouldn't you say that it a little bit is competition from a workforce standpoint? I mean, if we're not able to reshore, and we do push lots of jobs to China because we're buying more and more from China, and we obviously we buy a lot from China. I'm a big believer in the global economy. I'm not saying that it's a competition where it's one versus and the other loses, but there is a shift of a percentage of jobs that we will ultimately not have in the US if we don't have that manufacturer. I mean, the amount of jobs that we have in the US in a manufacturing standpoint is only going to decrease percentage wise versus what gets added to China if we don't keep up on a manufacturing and automation standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I think, in order for us to continue to drive and bring jobs back here to the US, the companies need to invest in automation and Industry 4.0 solutions. If a manufacturer is out there and they can no longer, if a business owner is out there and they no longer can have the labor force or the resources to make that product, that company's not going to shut down. They're going to start looking, okay, where can I get this material and resources elsewhere. And if they can't get either the talent or the the
Material.
labor or the opportunity, they're going to have to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
And you've seen that. You've seen companies that have shut down plants and saying, well, I can go out and get a lower cost labor for making this product in China. But I see a lot of companies now looking back and bringing back and say, no, I can grow my business and bring it back here to the U.S.
Yeah.
At the same time. Yeah. A great example. Have you ever heard of, Jake, something called exometry?
I have not.
I think it's a great example of kind of the subject that we're talking about right now. I've used it before, and I know a lot of, people that are looking for parts can use it. So essentially, like the Airbnb model, the Uber model, where there's a service that essentially pairs you with different, producers, if you will, people that are creating the value. Exometry is this for machine shops.
Yep.
So I think it actually started with 3D printing, but now they've transcended into CNC machining as well. And they'll offer you basically can just upload your files and they'll give you an instant quote. It like basically, approximates at least what the cost would be. And exometry is interesting because they'll give you 3 quotes. They'll give you rapid, made from a nearby US manufacturer. That's the highest cost. They'll give you like a mid-tier cost, which is still probably American made, but it'll take a little bit longer. Maybe it's not sourced locally. And then they'll give you a very cheap cost, which is from China, but it takes 5 weeks to get there. And it's usually minimum quantity orders of like, 100 or at least, if not 500.
Is exometry, that's OK Zoomer with Aaron, right?
I don't know.
I just did a little bit of looking, and yeah. I want to say, after you were saying to me, yes, I do know. So exometry, there's a podcast out there that Aaron's done, and I was actually on his podcast
Okay, cool.
all of last year. So yeah. I've heard of exometry before. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great company.
That's
And
awesome. Really, really cool company. I mean,
it represents this reshoring, at least opportunity. Like, I've talked to customers that would very much prefer to use the American, option on exometry for a number of reasons, not just locality and speed, but also the minimum order quantities. And, they especially use it when they need to start to prototype things, right? It's not good to be prototyping
absolutely.
out of China, right?
Yeah.
Maybe when they hit quantity, they'll go back to China just for those reasons. But now they can start to entertain options in that regard. So that's cool. I got to check out that podcast.
Yeah. It's OK Zoomer by Aaron Lichtig. And yeah, because I did that. We had a conversation, and he's actually a Jeopardy champion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Quick little rest in peace to Alex Trebek for that one.
Just a,
Exactly.
Ken Jennings has been holding it down, though. I have to admit, he's pretty good. A big Jeopardy guy.
just to put it in perspective, so about 10% of the U.S. workforce is employed in manufacturing. I think it's like 12% of the economy or the GDP is manufacturing.
Yeah, interesting fact that I put out there, Zach. I think it was like last week or the week before, where if you were to take America's manufacturing in terms of GDP, it would be the 7th largest country in the world when it came to economic dollars.
Yeah,
Very
I
cool.
saw that one. Yeah, I think I reposted that one. It's real interesting. I think we only want to grow that as we look forward. And I mean, I see there being such a stronghold for us to be able to pursue over the next like 10 years. So it leads me into an interesting question, and we didn't prep you with it. So I'm real excited for your authentic answer here. When will lights out manufacturing be a thing? When will it be that, say, 25% of companies will have lights out manufacturing? Because obviously there'll be plenty that'll do like the first one. When's the 25 percentile take place?
Oh man, it's so hard to say. Will it happen eventually for all companies? No, there's always going to be a need for operators. Lights out manufacturing is not going away. I mean, for some companies, we see that process. We see automation handling that. I mean, you look at companies who are doing additive manufacturing, right? They'll take a part they want to 3D print, plug it into a printer and it will print overnight for 13 hours. But I mean, you could say the exact same thing for an automated CNC machine, right? You know, if we have a part that we want to mill down, I mean, we could argue that that's lights out manufacturing.
Yeah.
Because I can put in a raw, billet of aluminum, and out comes a fully CNC'd, deburred, clean part. So for 25% of manufacturers, I couldn't even give an honest number out that. Maybe my kids will see that number at 25%.
Put it that way. How old are your kids? To put it that way.
And my oldest is 3 years old.
Okay.
And she might see that in her generation, but we're getting there. I mean, we can go on the discussion of AI and deep learning and all that stuff, but here's the exact same thing, right? Industry 4.0 is a buzzword right now. Industry 4.0 has been around for 20, 25 years.
Oh yeah.
So look at how long it's taking for companies to look at, taking their machines and bringing it up to an IoT cloud. When we have the discussions on AI and deep learning as part of a manufacturing process, we are years and decades out from a lot of manufacturing companies turning.
I don't know if it'll ever happen. I mean, I don't like.
Not completely, yeah.
I mean, I just think that when you add in like telecommunication, you can have people monitoring it from across the globe. You can really bring the true term global, global market together, where you could have a company in one part of the globe, 12 hours different, somebody's monitoring it overnight, and they have a robot that they can augment with their hand and do some sort of maintenance or some sort of tweaking, because they have such fine control. And 5G obviously brings in, obviously what's next after 5G and 10, 20 years from now?
Six is coming.
Yeah, but I mean, how much faster will that be? Yeah.
Well, the problem is it won't work through a piece of paper, but it'll be here.
It'll be interesting just to see how that takes off, where maybe it will never actually occur.
Yeah,
and that's the whole thing. I don't know how many companies right now have a complete goal of lights out manufacturing, but I think what their goal is, example is that, a controls engineer who could log in anywhere to a machine and not have to be present on the floor. And you saw a lot of that right now when discussions were first happening back in the pandemic, where they say, hey, unless you're an absolute, need to be in the manufacturing floor, we want you to work from home. So a lot of companies were like, well, how can I still have my controls engineer who's not necessarily on site to be able to trouble and diagnose a machine? So you see a lot of devices out there that are really merging the raw machine to a cloud or a way to communicate over the internet.
Do you really like the term lights out? Do you think that's really indicative of what we're talking about? Or are we just talking about, automating the factories to a point where we need less humans in them? Is it really actually turning the lights off? And I just don't really know if that term is representative of what we're actually going for. It's interesting. I think Eric Neves, right? Plus One Robotics. I'm not sure if you've ever, you might have heard of him. And he, his software is really cool. Like a lot of that understanding, like the bin picking that he's doing, is based on the idea that you will need teleoperation, and not every grasp of an object will be able to be solved with some AI program or anything like that. And so they have people sitting on the other side of the screens. They're not controls engineers. They're just operators, right? And those people can actually go in and specify exactly how the robot should go in and grasp that part. It trains the neural net, and it also gets the robot running at the same time. So you don't need someone there. And it's exactly the kind of thing, we've seen companies like Infosys, right, come in, where they're taking IT and they're making it mass available by kind of automating an entire, department for a call center or something like that. That's exactly where I think we're going to end up with manufacturing eventually too. As soon as these technologies start to converge to a point where they're all approachable enough for the everyday person to use,
Absolutely. And the whole point I look at with an automation is, a lot of when it comes to an operator, I think, part of it is, increasing the person's self-worth and how they view it. If a person's doing 10 hours a day and all they're doing is, there's a video I posted a long time ago about a person who's moving 5-gallon water jugs and stacking them on doing pallet
I remember that one.
And
backbreaking.
Yeah. And there was a celebration for how hard this person was working. And applause to them for having the stamina to do that. I know I couldn't do that,
Yeah.
for the shift that he is. But at the end of the day, is that something we want to celebrate, or is that something that we want to address and say, no, that person's body 20 years from now is more valuable than trying to put a throughput of stacking this equipment.
Yeah.
And if we can take that person's livelihood and make it safer for them as a whole, where they can go home and say, I contributed to something without having to use my body as a resource that I'm going to lose out on in the long run. I say that's a success for a lot of automation and
It's a
implementing new
tool.
technology. Absolutely.
It becomes a tool for people to use. And I think that's what's so cool about what collaborative robots has brought about, where it's like, it's not about like taking your job. I mean, it's not, you look at what like
not about the power and force limiting, it's
Yeah.
not about that kind of stuff. It's really just about democratizing automation for more people, and making it so that more people can consider it than they ever have before.
And GE put out a thing from Factory of the Future like 50 years ago, and they were like, within the next few decades, all jobs in manufacturing will be, pretty much gone, and we will have.
And how many years did they say?
I think that they said by the year 2000. I think they said within the next like 20 or 30 years. I could pull it up, but it was such a fail that they pulled it like a year later. It was quickly pulled. And I remember looking up, and it was like 1972 when it was like they were criticizing. I think it was 1968 when they released it originally, and it was such a fail. But it's really interesting is we're 50 years from then, and we're not even anywhere close. We're not even saying, hey, Factory of the Future completely lights out, manufacturing is going to occur. So I just think that it's very cool to see how collaborative robots have now kind of filled that gap where it's like it's not stealing jobs. It's really becomes a tool for people. And I think a lot of automation should have that same goal, whether it's a mobile robot or a conveyor, or, whatever it may be. All technology really should become something that is easier for anyone to use, that you don't have to be a degreed engineer or a manufacturing engineer to go on a floor and be able to put some of these like puzzle pieces together. It needs to be a lot more like Legos, where you can go on a floor, put these things together, give yourself an automation solution, and instead of being an operator, and that same like level of individual can do those very fulfilling tasks as a human.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to, excuse me, when you look at companies and the discussion around manufacturing, I don't see manufacturing jobs being reduced as a result of automation. And because I think what's happening is as we begin to automate more, as we begin to drive more technology into manufacturing, I believe there's gonna be more jobs that come up. There's gonna be more opportunity in the consumer world around it. Just look at an example like Amazon. Amazon's got 600,000 plus employees. And a lot of it has to do with the world of procurement and warehousing. And a lot of that is driven by automation solutions, whether it be through automated storage retrieval systems, a lot of, conveyors, and that has to do with all their autonomous mobile robots that they have on their facilities and in their warehouses. So it's just one of those things is, look at a company who's as young as Amazon is, and relative to the manufacturing and the automation world. And I'm a SpaceX fanboy when it comes to a
Me
lot
too,
of stuff.
Man. Zach knows I'm like annoying every time Starship's launching. I'm like texting him like, "Come on, dude, you got to get on air right now."
and I really think when you look at where some more industries are going to happen, you look at space and see so much more ingenuity, so many jobs around. I mean, how many people does SpaceX employ? And that is an industry focused on just outer space and technology and driven product and all the manufacturing processes. I mean, look at just today, Rocket Lab announced that they're no longer doing
Neutron,
the Electron, but they're doing a Neutron, which is a 8,000 or 8 was it 8 ton or 8,000 pound,
8,000 kilograms,
8,000 kilogram payload. I mean, so you look at when there's companies out there that are innovating in that manufacturing, and I love Rocket Lab just because they're 3D printing their engines and their rockets. They're making all of their
electrically powered turbo pumps.
Yeah, that and everything's out of carbon fiber wrap. It's just exciting to see all this ingenuity. But going back to space, there's gonna be so much automation in space. Imagine when we have factory floors that are making robots and drones to go out and mine resources on an asteroid or a moon or on Mars. It's just happening. I would say, Jeff Bezos retired, well, not retired, but stepping down as CEO of chairman. I think he's going to pick
Blue Origin.
He's going to take Blue Origin and run with it.
Yeah.
And so, his goal is to colonize space. And I think, with him and the money that he has behind it, in the next 20 years, you're going to see that happen.
Yeah, I think with the commercial interests, I do believe that the end goal will be to put the manufacturing in space.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier to the truly end goal. And I would love to see this in our lifetimes, and I doubt that we will, but there's a lot of natural resources out on the asteroid belt. And I can see a lot of manufacturers moving their entire operation out there and then being able to blast stuff with almost no delta V anywhere in the solar system they need to be able to build up infrastructure.
Yeah, it's going to happen. But all that goes back to manufacturing and manufacturing those resources and additive manufacturing in space. It's one of those things where the technology we're implementing right now on manufacturing floors is going to be the same technology we're implementing up in our, outside of our
atmosphere.
Earth.
Yeah. I love to see you live look up stuff too. It's pretty cool. Every time we mention something, I can tell if you're really interested because you look over at your screen and type it in real quick. But I think you were just looking up something on the GE Factory of the Future. Did you find anything on that, or when Zach mentioned that?
No, I didn't look that one up.
Okay.
No, I was looking up some Amazon and SpaceX statistics.
Yes, good stuff.
So I wanted to bring up two fun facts here, or two things that just recently occurred. Curious of your opinions on it. We talk a lot about robots, obviously, on this podcast. We talk a lot about 6-axis, automation, but obviously the world of mobile industrial robots and is blowing up. Locus Robotics, which does more than that, but obviously has a lot within that space, just got a $1 billion valuation. Berkshire Grey also has a lot within the mobile industrial space, just got a $2.7 billion valuation. Two things released in the past week. Curious of your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot of driving. And when you look at Kemper venture capital and mobile robotics, I mean, Berkshire Grey, Seagrid, Otto Motors, Locus, Venka Robotics, Gray Orange, Exotic, Fetch. I mean, all of these Adabotics, all of these companies out there.
Got a huge one too. That's right.
Are getting huge capital investments. I made a post last week talking about how by 2024, you're going to see $9 billion invested annually in startups and existing companies within the mobile robotics field. I mean, look at, we're talking Universal Robots, we're talking acquisitions. Teradyne, right? Picked up mobile industrial robots, they picked up AutoGuide. You're going to see a lot of these stuff as well, right? Amazon went out and bought their own company to manufacture their robots. It's just the warehouse and procurement space when it comes to e-commerce and getting product delivered to your door instead of going to a store is going to continue to increase.
Yeah. And Dynamics for that matter too. Everybody talks about Spot and all they think of when Boston Dynamics comes up is either Atlas or Spot, but they have an entire palletizing line, of real industrial 6-axis robots for palletizing.
Yep.
And then they have even kind of crazier, like the ostrich one. I don't know exactly what it was, but that's used for palletizing too. Right. So they've been bought 5 times now, I think.
Yeah. So you're gonna see, I think those evaluations in terms of, Fetch and all these companies and Locus getting big evaluations is because it exists. That market is there. That's the same reason why.
Is it a .com boom though?
No.
Is this going to just keep going? I mean, 75, they both, Locus and Berkshire Grey, I think both were 75 times forward revenue. I know Berkshire Grey is not profitable, say there won't be till 2024. So that's a huge bet on the future. I think it's totally worth it, but I think that I'm curious of your thoughts on is this more of a boom where people are going to realize it's going to take way too long to pay this back?
No, I don't think so. I think it's an investment that's happening. I mean, do you have Amazon, Chris or Zach?
Yeah.
Did you buy something on Amazon the past week?
Today?
Yeah.
Here you go.
New mesh Wi-Fi network for my house because I can't sit in my office.
Yeah, I mean that's the exact same
I
thing,
shipped stuff to Key West for my girlfriend's birthday because I was too late to, I didn't want to bring it with me. Couldn't pack it in there.
That's it. Yeah. Amazon's a lifesaver for your relationship too. But so it's that exact same thing. It's driving ingenuity. People want things now. We become a consumer-based group of people where we want things now, we want things quickly. Look at Amazon Prime. When 2-day shipping came out, no one thought that was possible. How could I go out there with Prime and get any product I want delivered to my door in 2 days? And here, where I live, we're going to be rolling out later this summer 2-hour delivery on
awesome.
Anything that I need, and groceries and all that stuff. So it's just one of those things where you're going to continue to see it happen. And these companies realize it as well. Amazon came out with their own deep learning vision inspection system.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's out there. So you're seeing these companies, and they're not throwing this money out there because it's a hype. I mean, where you could say Bitcoin and all this cryptos is a hype and all that stuff, but and people are buying Bitcoin because they're buying Bitcoin, and I can get a whole other thing with cryptocurrency. But when it comes to mobile industrial robots and collaborative robots and stuff, that technology is going to keep on happening.
And kind of to turn it back on Zach, do you think they really need to be profitable? Do you think that in order to have a successful business nowadays, you need to be profitable? Has Uber turned profits yet? I don't think that they have, or they certainly weren't profitable for a long time.
No, I don't think that you have to be profitable when you're at that valuation mark by any means. I'm just curious if we think that is this the height, or is this going to just keep going? And we're going to see in 2 years from now, 150 forward times, revenue. Like, at what point does the Warren Buffett style mentality of investing say, like, needs little cash, produces high margins, and, versus now it's like needs tons of cash, makes no money, and is not going to be profitable for 10 years. At what point does it become too much? Or are we going to just keep going down this path for another, 2, 3, 4, 5 years and be robot companies getting 200 times forward revenue?
I wish I had the answers for that. I don't know.
We'd all be a lot richer, wouldn't we?
It's cool though.
Yeah, but
it's awesome to see, because it's like, wow, so many great ideas out there can really take off, right? And you don't have to be profitable.
No.
And it's a lot of ingenuity happening right now, and I think a lot of these companies are getting ahead of what manufacturers and companies are going to be driving down the road in terms of what they need in terms of the mobile industrial robot space. I want to say, I don't know a number, but I would say definitely a large portion of margin of companies still don't have automation in their warehouse and logistics industry.
It's tough to find a home for mobile robots, like a true, like, knock out of the park application. I don't think it's the same as manipulators. I think at least the manufacturers that I've talked to, because I've been in the room with sales guys from mobile robot companies before, and you can walk the line and point to a lot of manipulation tasks, even if they're kind of outside of the reach of current technology. Maybe you'd have to pull in too much vision, maybe it'd be a little bit too much in cost, but it's like theoretically possible.
It's because of the customization too, right? It's just how much do you want to customize it? You can pretty much do a lot of the tasks that people want to do. It may cost a ton of money, have a lot of resources, might take 3 robots to do it, and this other application might only take 1 robot and might be a third or a quarter or a fifth of the cost. So I think that when you see a lot of the mobile robot things, it's the customization capability is just, it's harder.
Yep. And so it goes back to, I think, you're going to see a lot of ingenuity. You're going to see a lot of new technology coming about, and that's going to drive, more solutions. It goes back to Eric at Plus One Robotics or all these other places where, Aaron Prather over at FedEx implementing Plus One.
He's a good follow.
Yeah,
he's like you.
A couple
two guys are
shout-outs.
sparring for the top of robotics LinkedIn spot.
If you're not following Aaron Prather on LinkedIn or Eric from Plus One Robotics, make sure you guys are following those two right now.
Yeah. I would throw one more out to you. Florian from Item.
There you go. He's good. He's the content guy over in the Europe.
Yeah.
Great.
He's good as well.
All those names are great, and brings up a good point for you, Jake, or a question for you. What's next for you? I mean, we've spent a lot getting your opinions, but we haven't talked enough about the Manufacturing Millennial. What's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's great. It's a lot of exciting stuff that's coming up. Not all of it I can announce because there's some contracts and stuff that still need to be signed. But for me, it's
You
just
can
one of
come
those
back on the
things.
podcast and announce it if you want, and we can just
Yeah,
go.
we'd love to break that for you.
Breaking
But,
news.
For
Breaking
me,
news.
it's fantastic because my day job is I'm a business development manager for Fine Zelstra. We do robotics and control systems integration for manufacturers, and then my night job for the Manufacturing Millennial is working with manufacturers. So those two blend perfectly.
Yeah.
But as far as the Manufacturing Millennial goes, now that things are beginning to open up more, it's going to manufacturing facilities and systems integrators and robotic companies and discussing what solutions they're providing into the industry, going to manufacturers and talking about problems that they had and how automation solved those needs, and really just driving and influencing the importance of younger generations entering the workforce and adapting and implementing modernization, Industry 4.0, IIoT into every manufacturing space.
Cool.
So,
That's awesome.
for me, I would say, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Jake Hall, or you can search the Manufacturing Millennial. I'm on Clubhouse now doing almost daily or every other day talks on there. So follow me on there as well.
Are you
Great
getting a lot of traction
Clubhouse.
on Clubhouse?
Say that again.
Are you getting a lot of traction on Clubhouse? I guess what type of segment are you seeing join that space?
There's some great ones. So Mark Cloak, he runs a clubhouse called the Industry 4.0 topic, and I'm out there, and they have different topics all the time. So that's a great one to look up. But really, it's just it's such a unique platform that I'm enjoying, is because it's such an open discussion, right? There's no texting or video or all that stuff. It's anyone can hop on a well moderated room and have a conversation. I was on one today during lunch where we were talking about cybersecurity in the manufacturing workforce.
Yeah.
And then before, I was talking about, workforce generation. So that's another fun platform. So yeah, I'm on.
I feel like it keeps you sharp when you're on.
Yeah.
That kind of,
It's because there's so many people out there who've been in the industry for 25, 30 years that you just can listen and really learn from the experts.
Yeah.
For me, and that's one thing, I just want to become more knowledgeable in the space as well. But yeah, LinkedIn, my website's themanufacturingmillennial.com. And I'm sure you guys will link all that stuff in the podcast.
Yep.
But connect with me, and if there's manufacturers or other companies out there that want to look and say, hey, how can I use the space of social media to create and influence content? Reach out to me and let's have a conversation.
That's good.
Well, awesome, man. We appreciate you having you on here, taking the time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, guys. Super excited about that. I'm glad this whole thing happened, where I think I saw one of your podcasts that you were having, and then I messaged you to say, hey, I love the podcast. And then we are, maybe a week and a half later, 2 weeks later.
Yep. Got to move on it. I wish we had more time to talk about those Legos behind you, man.
Oh man, I have sets and sets of Legos that I'm probably should be ashamed of sharing how much Lego I have.
And the Vention extrusion is nice as well.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah, that's a fun partnership with Vention that
I love those guys.
Worked out together.
Cool. Yeah, we got to get you a crowd raise for a Millennium Falcon though.
I have one.
You do? It's just out of frame. I knew. I was gonna say.
I have the Ultimate Collector's Falcon.
That's awesome,
send me a robot to put back on my show.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. I was wondering if you had a UR up there. We're gonna get you
I got a lot of other ones up there.
We'll get you a UR.
We'll get you one. Are you planning on going to any of the shows that they have planned for the back part of this year?
Absolutely. It's just one of those when they open up and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Automate Forward's an upcoming one. Well, I would say is definitely check out. That's one of the big things I'm going to be doing a lot that is not officially released, but I'll be doing a big section of Automate Forward for all 5 days coming up.
What is the dates on that?
Automate Forward is, let me pull it up real quick.
And is that's a virtual one?
Yeah, it's virtual. It's March 22nd to March 26th.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it's an A3 event.
Yep, A3 RIA
Mhm.
event. So that's Automate Ceremony, the really big show that happens in McCormick Center.
Oh,
It
that's
was
right.
supposed-
Yeah,
it
you
was
are
supposed to
going to be
happen-
They moved it
That's
to
right.
they moved it to virtual because they haven't been able to.
Yeah. Get a
I
bit
think they're
done.
heading in Detroit, but yeah. So I'm really
Greg Smith's going to be
excited about it.
talking.
Yeah, so I'll be one of the guys that's talking each day during, I think from 12:30 to 1:30 Eastern, Monday through Friday.
Nice.
I'll be on and then doing some happy hour after the events too and stuff.
Well,
You
when
know,
we-
speaking of A3, that was the business forum was when I realized I was the young duck in the room.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah, it wasn't an HTD event for me. It was the A3 business forum in January of last year. And I was there for my first time. Boy, not only is it tough going to those for the first time, but it's tough going to those when everyone's about 30 years older than you in the room.
Oh, for sure. You know, I think Joe Campbell's is talking on Thursday for that event as well
Cool.
from UR. So
Yeah, that's actually where I met. That's where I met Eric from Plus One at was at the A3 like 3 years ago. So it's funny. All these events. Hopefully, we'll have a few in person at the end of the year.
I sure hope so.
Expo, I think, they're planning on doing that one still. Fab Tech will be in person, and hopefully we can get a beer then. That would be great.
Yep.
I got one more question for you, Jake, before we go, if you could. And I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this, but where do you get your stats?
You know, research.
Well, obviously research, but do you Google it? Do you have like some subscription?
I Google it, but then, something? I'll dig into the U.S. Bureau of Labor. Interfederation of Robotics is a great one, but then, A3 and RIA put out great statistics as well. There's a lot of government subsidized groups like MMTC here in Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, but then there's one for like each individual state as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of these statistics are by corporations and companies who have the same goal I have, is working with manufacturers to implement automation. And a lot of the videos and content I share are by companies that I'm working with to highlight a manufacturing process. I have a really fun one tomorrow that I'm going to be putting out. But yeah, it's super exciting with the content. It's available. It's just, for me, I found a way to curate it and make it exciting and engaging, to have discussions around automation. And when we can have more discussions around automation, it really reduces the risk mindset for manufacturers when putting in these solutions.
Definitely.
Well, yeah. Thank you again for coming on, Zach. Do you got any closing thoughts? Sorry, I cut you off there.
No. I was saying definitely. So yeah, thanks, Jake. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
See ya.